All right, folks. Mark here again, cooking books, bringing information. You like my content, you like the information, please feel free to leave a comment, like it, share it, tell your friends. I want to talk about evolution a little bit. Just touch on evolution for a second. We know the father of evolution, Darwinism, stuff like that. But without going too technical, I want to talk about it from a more applicable perspective. Like, how can you apply it to today, to your life right now in this very moment? How can you take one of its various mechanisms and apply it to yourself in a literal sense that can make your life more simplified, right? The journey, because life is very complicated. And I think we all can agree that it can be difficult at times. So here's one of the branches of the evolutionary tree, or one of the principles, which is natural selection. The reason why I chose natural selection, there's various. There's genetic drift, there's migration, there's mutation. There's so many different parts to this move. There's so many moving parts to the evolutionary vehicle. But natural selection is a area that I want to discuss, because the principle of natural selection is this: the premise is that the organism that is able to best adapt to its environment and or changing conditions of that environment are those organisms that will survive and reproduce and pass on their alleles, which are forms of their genes. I'll say that again. The organism that is best suited or best able to adapt to its environment and or changing conditions of that said environment are those that will survive, pass on genes, reproduce with mates, and so on and so forth. The organism that is least able to adapt to its environment and or changing conditions of said environment are those organisms that will be eliminated. In other words, those organisms will die out. What I want to concentrate on mostly in this principle is the ability to adapt people. I've read somewhere along the way in my research and me being studious that the definition of intelligence is being able to change or to adaptation to changing situations and circumstances. That's the definition of intelligence. And that right there hinges upon the principle of natural selection. Now, natural selection obviously goes a little deeper, because there's also an adaptation in terms of the phenotype, which are the visible characteristics of the genotype. The genotype is the actual information of the genes, the actual genes themselves. So in natural selection, there's also a change in the phenotype as well as a transmutation of the genotype. So there's a transmutational occurrence of the phenotype and a transmutational occurrence of the genotype. But again, I don't really want to go into the scientific explanations and jargons. I really want to focus more on how can we take this principle and apply it to your life right now. Because knowledge without application is foolishness. Knowledge with application is what's called wisdom. So the wisdom is this: we are the organisms, we are the species, and in order for us, according to this principle, to really thrive in our ecological system, in our ecology, we must be able to recognize that things that I did yesterday does not necessarily apply or can be applied to today. In the Bible, Paul says, the things that I did as a child, I put those things away as a man. I'm paraphrasing. The things I did was as a child, I no longer today do. I'm paraphrasing. And that hinges upon, again, the principle of natural selection. We as adults, grown folks, need to understand that if we are going to continue to thrive and to survive, we have to be able to adapt to our changing environments and or changing circumstances within those environments. And we need to be able to change or transmute our attitudes towards the environment that is no longer the same as it was in past times. So the applicable practicality of that principle is today, right where you are, under the sound of my voice, whatever the impediment or the hindrance or the obstacle or the challenge that is stopping your progress, whether it's a negligible progress, meaning infinitesimal, so it's so minor that it can be overlooked. But remember, small things have lasting consequences if you understand butterfly effect. So even though it's infinitesimal, it's important that you understand you must change, transmute, rearrange, permutate the way your thought patterns or the way your synaptic neural network has been wired for olden days into a new pattern for new days. We must learn to adapt and make changes, internal, psychological, mental. We must learn to make the necessary changes or adaptations that are going to be necessary because they necessitate your growth. They necessitate your development. I'll go as far as say they necessitate whether you live or whether you die. And this is not my opinion, my theory, my hypothesis. This is actual factual based off scientific and empirical data. The data is there. So if your relationship, oh, y'all don't want me to go down that road. If your relationship is being threatened, you have to know how to adapt. If you can identify the external force that's threatening and eliminate those forces, you might cleave to that force. You might say, well, I have history with this force. Well, me and this force go, you know, but again, the species, the organism that will be able to populate the future generation, that will be able to pass on its alleles into the gene pool, are those species that are best able to adapt when they can identify changes in their environment and adapt or change accordingly for survivability. Till next time, peace.